Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me right as usual is my co-host Richie O'Leary and co-host Alec Krauthamel. We've been away for about a week, but there is finally stuff that is around to talk about. So Rutgers football had its opening presser for spring football today. Greg Schiano spoke with the media for about 25 minutes. We'll get into everything he said. And the college basketball portal season has begun. The portal opened today. Talk about some names that have jumped in. As of recording this at around 4 o'clock on Monday, no Rutgers players have announced they're in the portal other than walk-on Peter Noble. But we expect that to not be the case, obviously, because this is 2025. That is not how college basketball works anymore. We'll get into both those areas and more. But first, this podcast is once again presented to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in March Madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the college basketball, for everything in college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So I know I mentioned football first, but let's talk basketball transfer portal first. Some interesting names have announced the intention to enter the portal over the past few days. Rutgers has kind of been connected with a few of them. I guess, Rich, let's just talk about the guys that you have confirmed that Rutgers is showing interest in, that have announced at least their intentions to enter the portal so far.
Let's see. Let's just start. I'm going to go from position to position, from point guard to center. As of right now, Rutgers has reached out to 2 point guards. Orlando Lovejoy from Detroit Mercy. A lot of connections there. Former Eastern Michigan guy. Played with Tyson Acuff. He's a Detroit, Michigan guy. Also played at 101 Prep in North Carolina, where Javonte Ware's currently at. So that's one of the little notable ties there. I think they're going to be connected to quite a bit of Michigan guys just because of Smoke Williamson. Kind of obvious. And then Adam Clark. Adam Clark's nickname is Bud Clark. You might know him as the guy that dropped a solid 22, 4, and 7 on Rutgers earlier in the year. Last season, he was teamed up with Jordan Durkak in the backcourt at Merrimack. Jordan Durkak won NEC Player of the Year and NEC Defensive Player of the Year. This kid won NEC Rookie of the Year. This past season, he was their new leading scorer. It doesn't always translate well, but if you watched him against Rutgers, he looked pretty damn good. Mind you, it wasn't a great Rutgers team either. So it just should be noted that Tennessee's probably going to end up landing him. His uncle is on the coaching staff at Tennessee, so that's probably going to be set in stone soon, if I had to guess. Jalil Bethia, a 5-star guard from the 2024 class. Didn't really pan out too well in his first season down at Miami. Miami got a new coach. He's a Pennsylvania native, played at Archbishop Wood. He didn't take an official visit to Rutgers before signing with Miami, but he was entertaining Rutgers. Rutgers was at a bunch of his games. He did take an unofficial visit to campus, so I don't think they'll end up landing a former 5-star. I'd be shocked. I'll say it right now. I don't think they honestly end up landing any high major transfers. But for the most part, if you're transferring out a high major, it's to either go to a different high major because you were so successful and you're getting paid now, or you're transferring down because it didn't work out. The other 2 names are 2 power forwards. I shouldn't say power forwards. Wings, I'll call them. Amari Monroe at Quinnipiac. A lot of Big Ten interest, New York native. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, and someone else who I can't remember are after him. Started out at Wofford, went to Quinnipiac the past 2 seasons, averaged 18 and 9 last season, pretty good, 1 year left. And then Chris Bell. Chris Bell was, what was his name? Chris Bunch, I think his former name was. He now goes by Chris Bell. He was a kid that took an official visit to Rutgers out of the 2022 class. Also took official visits to Syracuse and I forget, Washington, I think it was, before committing to Syracuse. So it's someone they're familiar with. It's someone they have a relationship with. 2 years left out of him. He's like a more true traditional power forward. I'm actually intrigued that they're going after power forwards for the sole fact that I do still believe Dylan Grant will be back, and he's almost locked in as your starter, unless for some reason in hell Peichel thinks I could play Dylan Grant at the 3, which is just not a thing, in my opinion. Not a good idea, at least. It doesn't make sense to go after a starting caliber 4. But those are the names so far. It's going to be a hectic process. There's like 600 people that have entered the portal today alone. And there's going to be a bunch of names mentioned. Brandon Knight's nephew just entered from NJIT. Average what? Alec, you can help me here. I think it's 19 a game.
Yeah, Tariq Francis at NJIT averaged 19 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game.
Yeah, but his percentages were bad.
Yeah, shooting splits this season, 36.9% from the floor, 32.4% from 3, 84% from the free throw line is good.
I know he's Knight's nephew, but I'm good in the nicest way. Like,
yeah, 19.2 points per game on 18.4 shots per game.
Yeah, that's Carmelo Anthony-esque. Like, not prime Melo. We're talking like old man Melo.
You look at his shot chart, roughly 40% of his attempts this past year were mid-range shots. I'm good with those.
Fits in perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not too optimistic with the portal.
The one that really jumped out for me was Amari Monroe, formerly Amari Tice. He was at Quinnipiac. Yes. He won Player of the Year in his conference this year. 18 points a game, 9 rebounds per game. Plus defender. He's a 6'7" wing, 220 pounds. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. Not a great shooter, but a plus defender. He averaged almost 2.5 steals per game this year. Evan Maya grades him out really well. Just kind of fits what Peichel's looking for. If you look at his games against NCAA tournament teams this year, he played 4. So he had a game against Yale where he had 23 points, 2 rebounds, first game of the season. St. John's was his lone high major opponent. Not a great game. 0 for 9 shooting on 4 points, 6 rebounds. But then if you look at his other 2 games against Mount St. Mary, who won the conference title in his conference this past year. Alec, you probably know the conference. I don't know which.
The MAC, yeah. Not the MAC. the MAAC.
There we go.
We gotta
what the hell?
I wanted to make sure that I didn't make that same mistake again, where we were talking about the MAC and
the MAC.
Yes, we'll call it the MAAC.
All right.
Fucking sheep over here.
So he had 25 points and 9 rebounds in his first game against Mount St. Mary. The second game against Mount St. Mary, 22 points, 10 rebounds. So fits the Pike archetype. Would be a pretty good addition, in my opinion. But
speaking of the MAAC, I guess we could just look at some other guys that have entered the portal. We don't know that Rutgers has contacted them, but they could or should. Mm-hmm. Looking at a guy, Josh Pasquarelli, a 6'3" guard from Marist as a sophomore, was an All-MAC All-MAC first teamer, averaged 16 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2 assists on almost 40% shooting from 3 on nearly 7 attempts per game. So a flamethrower from beyond the arc. There is a Rutgers connection. He's a Queens native. He played his high school ball at St. Francis Prep in Queens, where he played with none other than the son of Marco Battaglia. So that's a potential connection there. I don't know what kind of looks he's going to get from high majors, but Rutgers should at least reach out, and there is a connection there with Rutgers to someone who's pretty important in the athletics department, I would say, in Marco Battaglia. Another guy that entered, Jaden Pierre from Providence, originally from Elizabeth, went to Long Island Lutheran, has 1 year of eligibility left. I believe Rutgers was involved out of high school with him, though he ultimately went to Providence. It'd be an interesting one. I mean, this past season, he's 6'2", 185, so another smaller guard. He started every game for Providence, averaged 12.3 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, a little over 3.4 assists, so that's another potential one. And then the Bucknell center, Noah Williams. I'm not sure if Rutgers has reached out to him yet at all, or if they will. I don't know. Richie, you probably know better than I.
Rutgers talked to his people. They told me that Rutgers told them they would reach out, but they haven't reached out yet. I'll just say it. They have no shot there. Like, he's getting a shit ton of money. They have over 25 Power 5s already reached out to him on day 1. So, Power 4s, high majors. I guess in basketball it technically is a Power 5 still. Is.
If you factor in the Big East,
I think the Big East is high major. Like, let's be honest, all those Big East schools are getting revenue sharing. Like, they're all going to get the same chunk that Rutgers is probably going to get. And I don't know, man. What are we talking about? We're talking about Marist. We're talking about NEC kids. Like, definition of insanity. We're just going to do it again and say, fuck it. Let's see what happens. Like,
actually, it's not NEC anymore. It's the MAAC. Because Merrimack moved up.
Oh, sorry. Merrimack moved up. Wow. But what are we doing? No. Like, it just drives me nuts, man. It's a program. It's going to kill me.
Mackenzie Mbako's in the portal. Again, I don't expect Rutgers to
There's zero
have much of a shot.
in hell. Like, he just produced at Indiana, who has one of the bigger bags in NCAA.
I think if he'd entered last year, Rutgers would have had a little bit more of a shot since he wasn't that good as a freshman, but he was legitimately good this past year.
It's mind-boggling, man.
Yeah, and the price per player, as we've talked about for a while, like the yesterday's price is not today's price, as Fat Joe would say. House money inflation is going to be real. You're probably going to pay twice as much as you would have last year for players this year. So even though Rutgers now has significantly more money due to that, they're also going to have to spread it out more, for lack of a better term. So see how it goes. It's only day one. Rutgers, hasn't had anybody on campus or anything like that. I don't even think it's allowed right now, but I do expect them to reach out to a lot of guys, and we'll see how it goes.
And they're going to lose guys too. Let's just be honest. Yeah. Like, it's bound to happen. Like, they're I don't know what part I can say, but it's more like these guys are going into Pike's office asking for money, and it's like, hey, sorry, we don't have any. All right, well, see you. Like,
so I think we talked about this on one of our last pods. No, you're good. I think we talked about this on one of the last pods where I think I set the over-under for scholarship players who have eligibility to return coming back for next year at 3.5. Where would you guys pick the over-under if you were deciding guys who could come back that actually do? Because remember we said like Ace and Dylan don't count towards that list. Mm-hmm. Alec, you want to start on that one?
I said 4 last time. I think I'm going to go with 3 just because the nature of the portal this year, it's already going to be insane. I'm assuming it probably will be just as insane this year, and I think Rutgers isn't going to be immune to that.
Rich, what do you think?
So there's 7 guys that can return as of right now, not including Ace and Dylan. I'm going to say 5 leave. You could probably guess right now. Actually,
so
you probably won't guess. I think 2 of them end up staying.
Did you say 2? Okay.
I mean, you guys 3. Could probably guess, like, pretty easily, but like, I can even go down the list if you really want. It's like,
yeah, do it.
What does Emmanuel bring? Nothing. Okay, see ya. Jeremiah Williams, I've seen enough. I'm good. Jermichael Davis seems like a nice kid. Seems like he got a little bit better offensively. Still nowhere near the level of this type of college basketball. Ace's best friend. Ace is gone. Bryce Dortch maybe stays. Maybe. I could see an argument where he stays. I could see an argument where he leaves. The guy was going to redshirt in a year where most of college basketball doesn't redshirt anymore. It's just not a thing. Then you had to unredshirt him because it didn't work out because you got injuries. Durkak, take it or leave it. His brother's very good. If he wants to stay for cheap, sure, great. If he doesn't, see you later. Lathan, going to cost an arm and a leg. It sounds like he would probably be gone anyway. I think Dylan Grant stays. I mean, there's your positive. You get 1 starter back. But this is the new age of college basketball. This is what it's going to be like. You're going to end up losing guys, and you're going to have the new team every single season, especially when you don't have money to not only get guys, but not along with retaining guys. Like, it's just going to be a completely new team every year. Like, if Lino Mark comes in right now and drops 20 points, or I shouldn't say 20. If he drops 15 points per game, I think it's going to be tough as hell to hang on to him the next year. Like, they just don't have the money to do it.
No, it's brutal.
It's a sobering fact.
It is. I can't imagine you can continue to bring in classes of 4 or 5 freshmen from high school either.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cheap because you can afford it. Like, I don't know, man.
Another interesting portal name that just entered as we're recording right now, Isaiah Coleman from Seton Hall. Again, I figure
Rutgers.
I figured he was Seton Hall's best player, and Yeah, I'll probably get some attention, probably from like the SEC or something like that.
Knowing the Seton Hall guys that I do, he's going to a big name. Like he's been rumored to go to a big name last year, and they were able to put together the funds and just being able to keep him for one more season. But obviously, entering the portal now, he is bye bye. See you later. Like bag chasing, like everyone else.
Yeah, I do think though that Rutgers can like selectively choose where to fire off its nuke with, if they really want a guy, they could go out and get him now, but leaves you barren elsewhere. Do you think that they'll go for do you think they'll like target like 3 guys and spend majority of their money there, or do you think they'll try and spread it pretty evenly across the roster?
I don't know. It's interesting because you need a lot. Like you need a whole new roster basically. You need a big man. Like you're gonna have to put significant money into a big man because, and that market's insane. Like
yeah, I think that's the key lesson from this past year is you need a defense banker if you're going to play the way Steve Peichel wants to, and you need a guy who knows where he needs to go. Like you could have a freshman year Cliff Omori who has those physical traits, who has the kind of what you need to have as a center, but it's clear you need to also know where you're supposed to be on the court, which we didn't have last year.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you start from there and realize you're going to need to spend a lot of money on a center, I think that's probably the way that they go. If I had to guess,
the market's inflated now too because now everyone's putting in $4 to $5 million, if not more. Like some of these Big East teams are going to get more than that. I was told UConn's going to get like up to 6.
Wow.
Like they're going to have money to fuck around with. Like, for context, this is before the market got inflated. It was already a mess with centers. Last season, Vlad Golden's starting price was $950,000. I'm sorry, Danny Wolf's starting price was $950,000 to start.
Wow.
So he might have got that. He might have got more. He probably got more if I had to guess. This is what I was told via agents. Supreme Cook, who we talked about quite a bit, somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. In today's day and age, I guarantee he gets $1 million. Where there's the inflated market, like it's stupid amounts of money. Like, I don't know if Rutgers can compete with that. Like, that's the problem. Like, and then it's kind of similar to other teams. Like Minnesota apparently came out and they're like going to give the new guy Medved like $3 to $4 million of rev sharing, which I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're screwing your entire program over. Kevin Willard's pissed off about getting $4 million. And he might stay and he just fought and he now might get more than $4 million at Maryland. But the problem is it takes away from your football program now. So now you got to play picking and choosing and which one's better, which one's worse. Like, what do I have to do? Do I have to take $1 million from football? And I'll tell you right now, Greg's going to fight for that and be like, no, like, you don't touch my money. Like, remember who doesn't have 78 sellouts though? And just sellout thing, stupid.
I can't wait to never hear that again, which maybe I'm naive for thinking that's not going to be a talking point anytime things go wrong.
You can't bring that up.
We got to make a drinking game about like Peichelisms during press conferences. So referencing team GPA, referencing the sellout streak, referencing what
Big
else?
Ten being the best conference in
best conference
which
in the country.
Which he might have been right finally. Broken clock is right twice every day.
Referencing great people from great families, like what?
Jesus.
There's like 8 or 9 ad libs that can go into like any press conference. Anyway,
I just feel like Pike's all coach speak now, kind of like it's insane to say that Schiano might be like reveal more notable stuff in press conferences than Peichel does now.
Yeah,
like Peichel, like Schiano's presser today was good.
Yeah, well, that's
a perfect segue into it.
Yeah, perfect segue. Richie is a professional, if nothing else. So Greg Schiano spoke to the media today, the opening presser of spring ball. As Steve Politi pointed out, he seems pretty jovial, pretty upbeat about this team, and his comments kind of mirrored that. Sounds like he's pretty optimistic. You guys were both there. What were your general vibes from how the presser went today?
Alec, I stole the show before. It's all you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, he definitely seemed pretty optimistic, and I thought his answer to Politi's question was kind of funny. You know, if at the end of the answer, he said, you know, if you're not optimistic at this point in the season, then you got some problems. So, yeah, it was definitely optimistic. There was a lot of talk about the defense. Obviously, the unit of the 3 with the most overhaul. obviously the new coordinators, position coaches. He touched on a lot of them. I asked him, how much of an impact it makes to have those players that played for you. They know what to expect from the program. They know what to expect from him. How to instill it in those players. He said one thing he talked about actually a few times. Throughout the presser was how it's important for the position coaches to really live with your position, live with the culture, things like that. So a lot of good talk about where things stand with rebuilding the defense. I asked a question about the offense as well, since we didn't hear about that as much, but Ethan, according to Schiano, Ethan, I almost said Lathan because basketball season has been going on. Ethan, it's been a big step up in terms of his leadership, where, in the spring last year is mostly focused on winning the quarterback job, just doing his job, not really trying to bring too much attention or whatever, just trying to win the quarterback job and nothing else. And now he's really broken through as like the leader of the team and the leader of the offense. There's also some injury talk. DK Gilly's out for the season, which is a big blow considering. I know we were talking about him towards the end of the season as a guy who could potentially break out as a young starter next year, kind of like Akaj Sanders did last year. There are some other guys that will be held out of spring due to recovery. Most of them aren't surprising and injuries that we already kind of knew about. But Gilly being out for the season is definitely a blow. But overall it was pretty enlightening, I'll say, with spring practice about to kick off.
I actually had DK Gilly as the backup safety. Mind you, the other starting safety's in a little bit of hot water now too.
Why is that?
Jet Elad suing NCAA for his 7th year.
It's true. I do think that – so that's the Diego Pavia ruling for those who are unaware. What's going on there is that isn't that a part of the Diego Pavia?
Yeah, they've referenced him like 6 or 7 times, I think, if I read that correct. He's like cited in the article quite a bit. Based on this, they said it twice in the article, which we can get to afterwards. $500,000 NIL deal. Look what happens when you raise money. It's pretty crazy. He's trying to say Jet deserves a 7th year, or Jet's trying to say he deserves a 7th year of college because he did a year at Garden City Community College, which was technically the Ohio University's fault. He was at Ohio University, but he couldn't stay there, or wanted to transfer to Ohio, but he couldn't because he flunked out of. No, I'm sorry. He wanted to get in. He was at Ohio, flunked out of Ohio. And something weird happened where they're trying to say it's not Jet's fault. It was more of the academic counseling that he didn't really receive to help him pass. And I'm like sitting there like, dude, I feel like you have to try to fail college first off. Like, when not only try to fail college, you have to try to fail when you're on a sports team. They literally have an academic counselor that helps you with everything. So maybe Ohio's just dirt poor and they couldn't afford
They do that at Rutgers. So you can't speak to what they do everywhere.
I don't know what they do at Ohio University, but it seems like
you do see people flunking out of college lesser and lesser in terms of athletics recently. Yeah.
So they're trying to fight against it so he can get that next year. If he doesn't get that year, you're kind of in quite the hole in your secondary now because you not only lost 3 safeties, you lost 2 corners. You also just lost another safety to injury who is probably going to play significant snaps this year. They love to DK Gilly, from what I was told. Like, I know he redshirted, so everyone's like, oh, he redshirted. He's not that good. Like, no, he was really good last year. Like, in emergency situations, they would have played him. He's massive, too. He's like 6'2", like, what is it, 6'2", 220 or something like that? No, that's too much. 6'2", 210? Either way, he's a massive human being. So Jet is trying to get his 7th year approved. NCAA has lost a ton of cases already over this ruling. I don't see this one really going any different. I feel like if it weren't going to happen, we would have heard something by now, or at least back-channeled heard something from like a rumor mill or something like that. But I'd be shocked if he doesn't get this approved. On top of it, the judge is a Rutgers grad, which is kind of wild. How do you let that happen? I don't know, but I'm not going to complain. Just let him play. Like, so, but 500,000. Holy shit! Mentioned twice in the article.
And
in the complaint.
Was asked specifically about that number, and he said something along the lines of he'll never, unless he is forced to, he's never going to disclose what anyone's getting paid, which I can respect. But at the same time, I wonder if that's just a placeholder type number or if that's relatively close to what he's getting. But I would take that number with a huge grain of salt.
So it is actually mentioned twice in the legitimate complaint filed against the NCAA, the legal complaint filed against the NCAA. It cites $500,000 NIL deal twice. I'm just saying, maybe Rutgers has money for football.
I feel like a lot of NIL is also kind of like, not to say fake money, but it's like a lot of these deals, it's not like you're just getting that sum of cash. Like right when you sign the NLI, they just give you a bag of money, unless you're Tennessee in 2019. But
it's McDonald's bag, buddy. Get it right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like at least some kind of like placeholder or something like that, like some kind of like assets that amount to 500,000 or something like that, because it does feel like a round enough number that it could just be like a rough estimate.
Yep, good point there. A few other pretty interesting things that were discussed. Talked about the new coaches, kind of the thought process behind hiring 2 defensive coordinators. He talked about his prior relationship with Zach Sparber. He said he interviewed him in 2019, I believe, or 2020, when he was still with Virginia Tech, and he kind of walked away with the impression that this guy is, really, really smart. And I think Schiano's probably met the majority of the young rising coaches with regional ties through one way or another, and he's got that Rolodex that he can kind of tap into.
Yep.
But I believe he said that Rob Smith mentioned his name specifically when he was talking about coming back to Rutgers, and I think that's ultimately how he got chosen for the job. But you guys want to talk about some of the coaching changes that Schiano discussed?
Yeah, it was a little confusing because he's like, oh, they were worked at Duke together. And I'm like, wait, Rob Smith worked at Duke. Zach Sparber worked at Duke. Wait, Vic Hall was at Duke. Wait, hold on. Who was there then, when, why, what? It's like that Charlie from Always Sunny and thing. It's like, he was here, he was there. Yeah. Just like, and I mistakenly asked about Vic Hall towards the end. And I'm like, wait. He's like, I already talked about Vic. And I was like, oh, because I thought you were mentioning these 2 Duke guys, not that Duke guy. Like, what? Whatever. Anyway, it had to do with Sparber and Hall working together at Duke. He mentioned that Hall was they kind of just talked about one another. I guess Sparber technically was hired first because he was hired with Smith, and he talked to Greg about Vic Hall because there was an opening. Also talked about David Rowe. David Rowe, obviously, hell of a coach, hell of a resume, former Rutgers player, Florida guy. It makes a ton of sense. Not a lot of Charlie Noonan talk, but I do think that was still a pretty good hire. It's weird because you don't have a number anymore. It's not like 10 assistant coaches, so everyone gets a position group basically, and I kind of prefer it that way, to be honest.
One of the interesting takeaways I had was there was a question some reporter whose voice I didn't recognize asked when he was asking about roster turnover, and Greg jumped in and was like, we don't call them turnovers here. We call them takeaways because nobody actively, gives the ball away. You take it away. Yeah. And I think that just highlights, like, later on he, corrected himself and, everything, it was a nice humorous moment. But he later said that, they did a really good job of holding onto the ball. They only had 9 turnovers last year. I think he said 2 fumbles, 7 interceptions, but they did a terrible job for their standards of taking the ball away. And he later, when somebody asked about Bradley Weaver and about Eric O'Neill, he mentioned that they didn't have really a pass rush last year. And these guys are the 2 hardest workers on their respective teams last year. He said that this year they've come in and hit the ground running and have been 2 of the hardest workers in the program. So I think, and this is just me reading between the lines, they are attributing a lot of their defensive woes last year to not really having a pass rush, and they feel really good about where they stand with Bradley Weaver and Eric O'Neill and some of the younger guys developing. Did you guys kind of get that same inkling from some of his comments? Because a lot of the stuff you have to kind of connect dots with Schiano. Alec, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a big part of it. I mean, when he realized that they were talking about roster turnover and not like turnovers, he's like, oh, well, I guess that shows where my mind's at. But yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it. I mean, we saw what they did, not just with Schiano's words, but with the staff's actions as well. How many different defensive linemen and defensive ends and all that they reached out to or got in contact with in the portal as well. So yeah, I think there's something to it. Also, that was my good friend Phil Giacoma from WRSU. So he said first of many Schiano pressers for him.
Yeah, that's awesome. What else stood out to you guys that he said today?
I think he's just excited. It seems like he's very optimistic on what they've brought in coaching wise and player wise. He was very happy about the McNulty thing. It seems like wouldn't shock me in like a different world. McNulty's like a coach in waiting or OC in waiting technically. If God forbid Shiraka ever does go anywhere, I mean he's got the experience, most experience out of everyone on the team on the staff. I thought that'd be interesting. He's just very giddy. Like I've never seen like a Schiano smile.
Yeah.
It just seems very excited about this team. And we've said it before. I think this might be the best team he's built definitely since his return. Maybe since like those late, or I should say mid 2000 seasons where they really went on a crazy run. The problem is the schedule gets a hell of a lot tougher.
Yeah.
If you had last year's schedule with this year's roster, I'd be very confident that they would be able to do something like serious damage this year. With the schedule, it makes me question it a little bit.
Yeah, there was two things that I was hoping to hear some clarity on from Schiano. The one thing I wanted to hear him talk about was the position battles he's watching closest this spring, because we do have a lot of roles that are pretty solidified, or you could imply who's going to start there based on who they brought in. And I was hoping to hear him talk more about the offensive skill position talent that they brought in with CJ Campbell, with DT Sheffield, Colin Weber, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of other times to talk to him, so maybe we'll hear it later in the spring. Anything else you guys wanted to hear about that you
Friday
talk about?
or Saturday? I forget.
Friday, I think.
Friday.
I think Friday there's another availability, I think.
Yeah. So Friday or Saturday, one of those 2 days. He wanted to make this more off-season talk, which probably wouldn't relate to the wide receiver stuff, and then that will be more spring ball. But I mean, you get a chance to see him. Can't talk about it though.
That's true. Was there anything you guys are hoping to hear more from him as the spring progresses that you didn't really get touched on today?
Yeah, definitely part of like you said, the offensive skill guys, in particular. Also, some of like I said, like the interior line, how much they attack that, how much they plan to, integrate the new guys with some of the established guys. I'm sure we will hear more on that during spring ball as well as the month goes on. I did think his answer on the landscape of college sports now with the House settlement that hopefully will get resolved soon and all that. And I thought Steve Fleety asked a really good question of one that we have also been thinking of and planning on asking, how his experience in the NFL has kind of helped prepare him for I guess for lack of a better term, professionalification of college sports.
Ooh, that brings up a good point. Schiano was asked about the GM role type thing. He basically said he's like, we got to hire some people and make our own little department there, which I think he's hinting at like the fact he needs a front office type thing, which makes sense. But he did admit like he is in charge of it all right now. Like he's managing it all. Like he's the head honcho. He's essentially GM, head coach. He is Will Ferrell from Semi-Pro. He does it all. Player, coach, GM. So I thought that was interesting. I did want to ask him, and I'm pissed because we didn't get more time. Well, I didn't get another question. But I wanted to ask him about this 105 thing with the roster, because if that gets approved, and there's speculation they might get shoved back another year, and they might say this year's 130, next year's 105, just to help people out. But that's not a guarantee. There's also people fighting to get it to 105, and that's more of the lower programs that are like, yo, hey, get rid of like some of your dead weights are your trash is our treasure. There we go. So we'll see what happens. If it does go down to 105, you got 20-something people you got to cut still.
That's an awesome point, because, I mean, it's going to be like a trickle-down system where, the 20 guys or 30 guys Ohio State has to cut down is going to create some useful depth, I'm sure, for,
someone else.
Programs like us. You never know. I know that I think if you guys had to point to like one position on the team that maybe they decide after the spring we're going to bring another transfer in, where would it be in your opinion? And you could take the injuries that he discussed into account, but just like if you could think of a single position where you think, yeah, that might be unsettled by the end of spring.
I think we might see another. I know Richie's talked about this a lot too. I think we might see another linebacker, considering Mo Toure is going to be held out because of his injury recovery. Especially considering you got Daryl Jabome at one spot who's pretty much locked in and established as the starter. You got Moses Walker who's flashed at times but hasn't fully broken out yet. especially if you don't have Toure on the field during spring. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get maybe not like a star or starter, like locked in Big Ten starter caliber talent, but just someone like rock solid that's coming from, the group of 5 level who has starting experience and, knows where he's supposed to be on the field and things like that to have some good depth.
The smart man in my brain's telling me just say safety. It's the easy cop-out answer. Jet Elad, obviously in trouble. Not in trouble, but fighting for that 7th year. DK Gilly's out. Jesse O'Fury's the other safety right now.
No.
It's a barren wasteland right there. But I'm going to say offensive line. We know that they've looked into guards in the portal, and this is where it gets intriguing. How serious was that Felter injury? Because if he's still out, and if he's still out in spring, how healthy is he going to be for this season? We know Kobe's got the one spot locked down. Shedrick Rhodes was a swing guard / tackle last year. Now he's injured. He missed time last year too, actually. He's not healthy. Is Tyler Needham fully healthy at left tackle? There's a lot of question marks about this offensive line. You just lost your top guy in Holland Pierce.
Yeah. So, additionally, do you feel good about Needham transitioning to a left tackle?
Left tackle? I don't think he was bad last year. I think he was actually solid at right tackle. But if you remember, the line also fell apart when Holland went down. When
Felter went down.
Oh, when Felter went down at first. Yeah. Then they were trying to switch here and switch that, and it was just a whole mess. They tried every different guard. They tried, who was it? Dante Chin at guard. They tried Taj White at guard, who's Taj White is supposed to be your backup tackle. And it just seems like a whole mess of the offensive line where there's only really 2 solidified guys, in Zawinskis and in Asamoah. After that, Taj White was solid towards the end, so I would pencil him as probably the right tackle. But I would rather watch him and Needham battle for right tackle and get a solidified left tackle than have push Needham over and just hope that he's healthy and good enough. And God forbid one gets hurt. You're completely fucked.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about college football. They have this basically not half season. They have this little mini season that's just in the middle of nowhere where they can sort through all these things and kind of gear up. And they have a solid 4 months to prepare for the season. But yeah, I would have picked offensive tackle because you lose a guy who Greg highlighted. He's he's going to be hard to replace. There's not many guys who could say they started 50 games in the Big Ten in their career, and he's one of them. So totally agree there that Holland Pierce, I think when you don't have to learn an offensive lineman's name, that's usually a good thing. Not that we didn't know his name as a team, but there was times last year when certain linemen, we did learn their name for reasons that you didn't really want to know their name.
Yeah, if you ask me as a Seahawks fan, I hear the name Anthony Bradford, I start having war flashbacks.
Exactly. So it's going to be a tough replacement, and I'm not sure if that guy's on the team right now. We'll see.
That's fair. I had one more thing real quick before we sign off here. Some really smart reporter, I don't know who he was, asked about joint practices potentially and stuff like that. I found it interesting that Schiano, he said he loves the spring game, so it sounds like the spring game's not going anywhere, first off, based on what he said. He loves it, loves how it's Rutgers Day, blah, blah, blah. You get to meet past, present, future Rutgers students, athletes, etc. It is a cool moment, don't get me wrong.
But he talked about it being a unique college experience. College football is professionalized to an extent, but this is something he feels is an important part of college football. Go on.
And it's a great recruiting tool, let's be honest. So the cool thing that I thought was very interesting from him, I did not expect this at all. I asked about joint practices and saying maybe you do a spring joint practice because, Colorado and Syracuse just submit their bid to the NCAA to be able to do it. He mentioned joint practices in training camp.
Yeah.
And that's essentially a preseason game. And he said that they handled it pretty well in the NFL. You get in a fight, get off the field. Done. Done for the day. Which is obviously simple and easy. But I just never thought in any world this guy would say, I'm going to have a joint practice at the most tense time of the year. I was like, holy shit. All right. Let's do it, man. Bring Miami up here. Go to UMass. You got all these connections. You're not going to do it in Minnesota because conference, but any connection you got.
I think if you did that, it would have to be very region specific. He also said it would have to be the right fit because he was talking about how, in the NFL, he would only do it with teams where they had kind of an agreement where, whoever's involved in the fight, they're both out in training camp, like you said. But there are programs that make a lot of sense. I don't think you could have it against an FCS team. So I think your opponents are probably Temple, Delaware, like somewhere where you can like get down in a day realistically and have full practice and maybe stay for like a long weekend or something. But UConn, UMass.
Well, those schools will come to you, right? I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you're not going to stores for a weekend. Yeah. But UMass would make a lot of sense given Harry Simiak too.
The problem is their roster stinks right now, so it's like maybe I'm better off practicing against the twos than I am against UMass.
Maybe. I think there is kind of like an element of like when you don't know the plays, I think it's more like a game environment than when you're just going against the same set as the defense going against ones. But
that's fair.
It's all hypothetical. Like who knows if that's going to be even allowed. I think if the whole Syracuse Colorado thing does end up happening, it's going to open up the floodgates. Some coaches are going to want to practice against the best teams in the country. Some are only going to want to, go against parking cones. Some are going to want nothing to do with it. I think it's going to be, paint by numbers, kind of choose your own adventure for a lot of coaches. But it sounds like Schiano not only would be open to it, would prefer it to not having it. Which is where I think the NFL experience comes in huge. Being able to pick and choose stuff that worked in the NFL that he thinks would work in college and stuff that he knows wouldn't work. So maybe him leaving the first time, big blessing in disguise, but who knows?
Well, for context, the Miami thing, he was in Miami this past week, just saying, at Miami football practice.
Yeah, I know that Rutgers was on spring break last week. Was he recruiting and just popped in for a day? Is that what do you know what happened there?
I think it's a quiet period right now, so I don't think you can recruit. Might be wrong.
Okay.
On that. I gotta double check. It's a quiet period where you can't go out, but they can come to you or something like that.
Got it.
But yeah, no, I mean, they're close friends from what I was told. And he's just basically, when you're not playing him specifically, it's like, when are you ever going to play Miami? Like it was a crapshoot that you got them in the Pinstripe Bowl. Mind you can't go back to the Pinstripe Bowl and play an ACC school anymore. So it's just friends being friends. Coaches travel quite a bit. Usually it doesn't leak out. This one just has so happened to leak out because of a photo that was out there. And it's just like, hey, I know that guy in the background.
Yeah, Heatherman's there now too.
Yeah, so it works out. And you get to learn some stuff too. Like you get to watch them and be like, okay, all right, they did this. Like, why did they do that? Oh, okay, like I could do that. Like I could do that with my edge rushers because I have them now. So
not only that, you get an inside look at the players on the roster in the NIL and transfer portal era.
Well, yeah.
74 might be. Oh, I think he would.
Cristobal, you think he'd do?
I think if a Miami guy entered the portal and he wasn't a character concern or something like that, he could help the team. I for sure think he would go after him. Yeah,
it's fair. I think that would be like an unwritten agreement, like handshake between him and Cristobal. I'd be like, all right, your backup left tackle's pretty fucking good, dude. Like, you don't.
I think it's you don't coax them out, but if they do enter,
that's
hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll sell you.
Yeah. Speaking of which, that's another thing that Schiano talked about was, the culture fit when, going after transfer portal guys, because he talked about how every single one, that's a huge part of it, because if you bring in a guy from the portal, he's probably going to play. And if he's going to play, he's probably going to make plays. And if he's going to make plays, people are going to try to follow him. So you have to make sure that he's a good leader and fit for the culture as well, which I thought was a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that was a great point. He like, because we talk about all the time, like bringing in a portal guy for depth, and that's not really a thing. So you said when you bring a guy in from the portal, you expect to play them, and if you expect to play them, they have to, so on and so forth. A lot of really like good quotes from this portal presser, or not portal presser, but this presser. It's about 25 minutes. If you like some of what we've talked about, you can watch the full video on the channel below. We'll link it in the comments, but yeah, no, I'm excited. Ready to kind of flush the basketball season and start preparing for football here, because even though it's portal season for basketball, I'm just like, I just need something to look forward to. And I don't know what it is, but it feels like Schiano has this thing back on track, and like it's so clear that the program's in the right direction, that things are moving forward, and the roster itself is in a really good spot. I'm just excited for football, man.
Bet the over.
5.5.
The over.
The over.
Right?
I think it's 5.5 or 6.5 right now. I would not bet that right now.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't.
If it's 6.5, I wouldn't. The schedule's brutal.
But when Jet Elag gets his 500K, bet the over.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. All right. Well, thanks once again for listening. I knew I think we were a week without a pod. Just wasn't a whole lot to talk about, but
That's
now
why
that
we got 45 minutes.
Exactly. But now that we have spring football, I'm sure we'll have stuff pretty regularly to talk about. So for me and Richie and Alec, this has been another edition of the Night Report podcast, signing off.